Hey everyone, the wait is over. The CRBN 3.X is here. If you want to hear about it, stay tuned. So I'm talking about the new X line of CRBN. Now these are the first thermoformed unibody paddles that they came out with, and these have been very good paddles. They have been responsive. The feedback has been great. So let's talk a little bit about this line in general, right? The normal stuff, we're gonna go over the unibody, the thermoformed. It has carbon fiber that goes all the way around the edge and seals it all the way down to the handle to eliminate breakage. Also, they inject the edges with foam, so that gives it a little bit wider sweet spot, a little bit of a dampening feel. But in general, these paddles are stiffer paddles. The feedback on these paddles are it's very crisp coming off the paddle face. So the original CRBNs really have a muted feel. So great paddle, great feel, good plow through on those paddles, but they feel muted. And when I say muted, it means that no matter where you hit on the paddle face, you can't really tell exactly the precise location, but it still feels solid. It feels plush no matter where you hit it on the paddle. Like any paddles, if you hit outside the sweet spot, you're not going to get the performance that you typically would because you're hitting outside the sweet spot, you're hitting on the edges. So you'll lose a lot of power, but you a lot of times won't lose control on the good paddles. So these thermoformed ones were very poppy. They had a lot of power to them, and they're in the top 15 as far as spin goes. And so the first two that came out was the 1X and the 2X, and you got the long handled version in the 14 and the 16 millimeter. Then you got the shorter handle version in the 14 and the 16 millimeter, with the size difference being, you know, these guys here are 16.5 by 7.5. This guy here is 15.75 by 8. And if you took these two and they had a baby, we would get the hybrid, the 3X. Now, let's talk about the difference of the 3X. They all come in the 14 and the 16 millimeter. The difference in weight, let's talk about just the specs here between these two. So the 14 millimeter here comes in 7.8 ounces. It has the 16.5 by 7.5. It has the 5.25 inch handle with the 4.125 inch circumference of the handle, with the 16 millimeter being the 4.25 circumference in the handle. So a little bit thicker handle on the 16 millimeter. That's to be expected. And then the weight difference is 7.8 ounces to 8.1 ounces. What is the difference? When we look at these paddles, you can see by the shapes that they are different shapes. This and this one are the same length. But what they've done on the new model is they've shortened the handle and they've given you more sweet spot. Let's talk about the performance of this paddle when I first played it. You know, these paddles here are some of my favorite paddles to play. I still play these paddles. They're some of my favorite ones to pick up out of the bag. But this one here has a lot more control. When I say a lot more control, it feels like the sweet spot is the size of Texas. And you can expect that with the bigger face. So if I put these next to each other, you can see that the paddle is much bigger and just a little bit less wide than the 2X. And then when we compare it to the 1X, you can see that they're the same size, but then this guy has a lot bigger face. We got a lot bigger face here and a little bit more width here on the edges. And what that's done is that widens the sweet spot on this paddle. What you sacrifice when you go to sweet spot. So let's talk about control versus power. So you have choices when you want to play these paddles, right? You have defensive-minded people, you have offensive-minded people, and you have all-around play. So offensive-minded, we want to go with the 1X because the 1X is really offensive paddle. You can get more plow through it. You can get a little bit more spin with it because you can get over the ball, whip your hands through the air. It's for the power. The all-around player really wants to have the 2X. If you like this body style, you can be really versatile at the net. Your hands are a little bit faster at the net with a smaller paddle, a little bit wider sweet spot on this guy, so you have a little bit better control with this one than this one. And then you have the 3X. The 3X, the most control out of this line. I found that playing defensively is really where this paddle. So this really compares to the Electrum E. It compares to the Groovin E. And in some of the pro drives, the bigger faced paddle with the shorter handles. This is the paddle that you're gonna be really good defensively at the net, really good with your resets, really good with third shot drops, really good with any type of touch shots this paddle I found was really controllable and really just fit into my game. I am a defensive-minded player. I typically don't need any help from the paddle to get any power. I could tell that between these three, this guy here has just, a little bit less power than the 1X, a little bit more power than the 2X because it's a longer paddle. So you can generate a little bit more plow through when you have a little bit more weight and towards the front end. And so when you look at the weight variance of this, these are a little bit more head heavy than the 2X. So the 2X is a very head neutral model, with the 1X being more head heavy. With the 3X here, you can tell that when you feel them next to each other, it's a little bit more head heavy because it has more mass up here in front of your hand. So it's a shorter handle with more mass. That's gonna give you a little bit more head heaviness, which actually gives you more plow through. So that's why I would put it second in the power in this line, but it's top in control. So the only thing that I could say negative about this paddle is if you have a two-handed backhand, this paddle might not be the paddle that feels the best to you because it is a little bit tighter to get the two-handed backhand in here. And you would think a 1/4 inch doesn't make that much of a difference, but it really does make a difference for those that like a really comfortable two-handed backhand. But if you're used to playing with the Groove in E or the Electrum E, this paddle is going to feel very natural to you. When I played defensively, the resets at the kitchen, the counter punches with this, I found it had plenty of pop and plenty of plow through when you wanted to put the ball away. So I really enjoyed playing with these paddles. I really felt that the spin, these paddles with the carbon fiber face and the weave here that you can see, these things here generate probably top 15 in spin. They're in the 1800s in spin. Chris Olsen hasn't tested these ones, the 3X yet, so we'll update those numbers once he gets them done. But as far as the spin, this guy here was the top in spin in this line in the 1800s. A little bit less for this guy. I would put this guy right in the mix there. It's really hard to say where it's going to fall because with this wider face, it might be harder to brush through the ball. Might be a little bit slower to brush through the ball because of the head heaviness. But the plow through I found was a very good comparable paddle. So right now, if I had to pick between these three paddles, this would be my singles paddle because I can generate the most pop with that and the most spin. But in my all-around game, for me, the 3X would be the model for me because I don't like giving up the length. I like to have the reach because I like to take the ball out of the air when I play. And so in the kitchen, I like to take the ball out of the air. I don't like to let the ball bounce if I can avoid it, to take away time from my opponent. And the shorter handles for me just don't feel as comfortable because I prefer to play a defensive game. Because these paddles are only 8 ounces, some people like to play their paddles a little bit heavier. And if you want to get up to 8.5 or you're playing 9-ounce paddle, like a top female player in the world, she plays a 9-ounce paddle. So it makes me feel pretty small that I can't play a 9-ounce paddle without having elbow pain. But if you want to weight these paddles, I would recommend that you weight the paddles in the 4 corners here. And so one of the things you do with lead tape, and there's many, we have a video here, we have videos that you can, I'll put a video in the description below of where I recommend to do lead tape and the whys behind each of the lead tapes here, and there's tons of videos out there for that. But I would recommend you putting the weight on all 4 corners here and just weight it up that way. If you want to take a little bit of the power away and give a little bit more control, you can just weight down here by the handle. It'll still make it feel a little bit more head heavy, but what it does is it takes the swing weight down a little bit and it allows you to control it just a little bit more and make it even wider sweet spot. If you put it on all 4 corners, this sweet spot is huge and I feel like you really couldn't miss a shot. But all of these paddles are great paddles. They all are $229. You can get our pirate discount code in the description below. If these paddles aren't for you and you want to check out another model, check these out. Yeah, that's a good paddle too. I love that company.